Okay, everyone, let's get started. It looks like we are streaming. We're on WebEx, and I know, right? Crazy. It appears to be working. So let's get started. We just have a couple things to do. First of all, we'll start every meeting, at least until the deadline for on requests for bill introductions. Anyone have any bills they'd like to request from the committee? Seeing none in person or online, what about out there in the gallery or the corner where we shoved you all? Nothing? Okay, next, want to take up the rules. We sent those out last week. I don't know. Oh no, heck, this is still the first week. Sent them out at some point in time. It feels like it was decades ago. So you've had those. Any discussion on those? Representative Heiberger?
Mr. Chair, in general, I think the rules are great. I just have a minor suggestion for change, and really not because of anything that I expect to happen in this committee. But Rule 23 regards adjournments. It says adjournment. I don't have a copy here. I believe it's at the discretion of the chair. Mason suggests that all committees should be adjourned upon motion or on unanimous consent. And again, I don't expect to have any difficulty with that here, but I think we've all seen instances where the chair has unilaterally adjourned meetings in order to shut down discussion. So just for form's sake, I would suggest striking the current 23 and replacing it with language substantially similar to adjournment requires a motion to adjourn, a second, and the affirmative vote of a majority of the members present.
Okay, I will take that as an amendment to the rules. Is there a second? Either in person, a second by Representative O'Hobson. I guess just to start off, my discussion would be that, as Representative Heiberger pointed out, I hope this isn't a concern with me. I think we work well together in here, and I've not needed to adjourn a meeting, and I certainly don't anticipate doing so. Because again, we work well together and we do good work, and I value everyone's opinions. Any other thoughts on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect and appreciate what my friend Representative Heiberger proposes, but I agree with the chair that that is unnecessary in this committee. Thank you.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to ask, the last 2 years in this committee, have we operated under the current existing proposed rules?
We have added 19, 20, 21, and 22, which are just in response to being able to have WebEx live stream meetings, but the rest of the rules, including 23, is the same as it's been.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the utmost respect for the chairman and actually all of my colleagues in Topeka, but one of my consistent themes, I've got a deep conviction that I think the more power we let accumulate at the top, whether that means at DC, Speaker of the House, or Senate President, same in Topeka, and same for our committee chairman, I think the less the voices of the rest of us get heard. So I do believe majority rule by and large is something that I'm going to try to stick with principle from start to finish. But that said, I'm in Wellsville, Kansas today, so I understand that I probably am not allowed to vote. So I would otherwise support the maker of the motion, but I think I will sit quietly on this particular one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on Representative Heiberger's proposed amendment to the rules. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Motion fails. Back on the rules. Any further discussion? If not, Representative Owens.
Just a point of clarification. So having not seen the rules, we just heard Representative Carmichael vote via WebEx. Is that allowed in the committee?
According to rule number 22, no member shall be allowed to vote unless they are in the State House. So no, he will not be able to vote.
Mr. Chairman, I am in the State House. I'm sitting in my office. I'm entitled to vote.
Oh, you are. I think he was referring to Representative Samsel. Representative Samsel appears to be somewhere else.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the rules? Representative Hoheisel.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the rules.
Is there a second?
Second.
Representative Carmichael. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say
Aye.
no. Rules are adopted. Thank you. We will now take up, I usually say get out House Bill 2048, but we don't have anything to get out, so pull it up on your computers. I'm going to start with some amendments, and Natalie, yeah, there's Natalie on the screen. She's going to walk us through these. The first one, we're calling a technical amendment, and I'll have Natalie explain why I believe it's technical and she believes it might be more than technical, but it really doesn't change a whole lot. So Natalie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So I just emailed this balloon amendment to Kathy. She will email it to the distribution list here and work on getting it pulled up on the legislature's website. But in the meantime, I'm going to attempt to share my screen to show you guys what the balloon amendment is that we're going to be talking about. Let's see here. Okay, so this amendment proposes to make a change on page 6, line 7 by striking September 15th, 2020. If you read that sentence there, it says the state of disaster emergency described in that statute shall terminate on September 15th, 2020 as provided in KSA 48.924B. In reality, the disaster declaration did not end up terminating because the provisions of KSA 48.924B allow for extensions. And so while I don't think this date would have any legal effect, I think it is a little weird and, you know, maybe misleading to leave it in there like that. So this amendment would strike that date. So the sentence would just read, shall terminate as provided in KSA 2020 sub 48.924B.
Any questions for Natalie? If not, I'll make a motion to move this amendment, second by Representative Hoheisel. Any discussion? Not, I will close and move my motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carries. The next amendment that I have, Natalie, let's do the business closure language.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to write that down. Okay, let me get that to Kathy. Okay. That one should be coming your way, but let's so this amendment proposes to make a change on page 12 with the wording of the business closure language. So the change, the way it would read if this amendment were adopted would be the governor may not order the closure or cessation of any business or commercial activity, whether for profit or not for profit, and may not issue an order that prevents the movement or gathering of individuals. Her 15-day ability to close business, as well as the State Finance Council's ability to extend that 15 days, would remain stricken from this section.
So I will move my motion. Is there a second? Representative Owens. Now I'll just briefly explain. As I shared at the beginning of yesterday, the goal with House Bill 2016 is to the best we can, extend the status quo. And so the draft language that we used in the bill, that actually came out of some language that was suggested at the KEMA interim committee meeting. And so yesterday, I think it was Representative, was it Heiberger or Samsel or both of them, asked if we were changing that language. And I referred back to a proclamation by the governor, which the language was not exactly the same. And so last night, referred back to the proclamation, actually ran this by the governor's chief legal counsel and came up with this language, which again, I think continues forward with where we've been, keeps the status quo in place. And as such, that's why I have the amended language. So any discussion on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the committee should know that were I the governor, I would not have agreed to this language and I would have taken a different tact. But fortunately, I am not the governor. And I have been in contact, and as the chair knows, we worked with the governor's general counsel. I think the last of these amendments I saw sometime around 1 o'clock this morning. And I am informed by the governor's general counsel that this is acceptable to the governor. It is not what the governor might have wanted, but I intend to support this balloon amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Heiberger?
I essentially concur with the former representative. I think the language is too broad. It doesn't give the governor enough flexibility to deal with a fast-moving crisis. I don't believe that if the governor were a member of the majority party, we'd be looking at language like this. But again, for the same reasons prior representative stated, I will support it.
Any further discussion? Not. I'll close and move my motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. Motion carries. Are there further amendments to House Bill 2048? Representative Burris.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have an amendment, and basically it pertains to page 10, line 20, and it would, and I'll pull it up just real quick. I would like to respectfully propose to amend, so section 6, the first line there, page 10, line 20, strike June 1st, 2021, and replace it with January 24th, 2022, as basically an attempt to maintain the status quo longer than June 1st, obviously. That's the basic thing I would like to propose to do.
Does Natalie have an amendment, or this is just conceptual?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Sorry, I was pulling it up here. So essentially what we would do here is those changes that you're making in 48.925, the way they look right now would be extended until January 24th of 2022, which is 2 weeks after you start your 2022 legislative session.
Okay. Representative Burris, do you want to move that amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do wish to move my amendment.
Is there a second? Representative Owens? Discussion? Representative Owens?
Having had a chance to have these conversations, I think the crux of this is the whole point of this legislation is to extend it to give us plenty of time to work out the finer details on many pieces within this legislation. What this does is basically takes into account the what if scenario. What if we're closed for a longer duration than June 1st? What if there's an outbreak? What if this, lasts longer? So the idea here is gives us just a little bit more flexibility in the event that something were to happen or we were to be closed down and we couldn't work out these finer points. It would extend these provisions until the next legislative session begins.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, a question for the reviser.
Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Scott, I had not actually seen this balloon and didn't necessarily anticipate that it was going to be offered. However, would I be correct that if the legislature is in session, and if the legislature in its wisdom decided that this date in January of 22 was in fact too far away, that we could always propose and presumably enact additional legislation that would shorten this date based upon conditions and of course subject to the governor's power of veto.
Yes, you certainly could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Burris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to thank Representative Owens for his explanation, because that was basically, my reasoning for offering this amendment. I appreciate that.
Representative Jennings, I think I heard your voice.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. For the reviser, I guess, in the event this amendment were to be placed in there, and in the event that the emergency declaration is otherwise terminated by the governor prior to that date because conditions have improved, all of the provisions of this, except those that might be saved very specifically by language, will be coming to an end anyhow. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I'm totally following your question. So this statute is essentially where you guys limited some of the governor's powers. So an example would be that she can't issue an order restricting the sale of firearms. So right now, those restrictions on her power expire on January 26th. This bill proposes to extend that out to June 1st. This amendment would extend that even further to January of 2022.
So then maybe my question's better phrased in this way. If the emergency declaration is ceased by order of the governor, which I think she would have authority to do, then none of this would matter anymore. Is that correct?
Well, so this statute does come into play during any state of disaster emergency. So as long as there is an effective state of disaster emergency going on, this statute is the one that, gives her a power to issue those executive orders. So.
That's interesting. So if there's an armed insurrection, she can take no action with respect to firearms. Is that correct?
Well, so if she were to issue a new state of disaster emergency, and forgive me, let me pull up the bill language here. So say she was going to issue a new state of disaster emergency because of, that type of situation. Subsection D in this statute currently reads, the governor shall not have the power to or authority to temporarily or permanently seize or authorize seizure of any ammunition or to suspend or limit the sale, dispensing or transportation of firearms pursuant to subsection C8 or any other executive authority. So that limitation would apply to any state of disaster emergency that would be declared.
Okay, and then
and all of these would, yeah.
So if I understand the proposed amendment, instead of ending all of these quote unquote temporary provisions in June, it would extend all of those until January, ostensibly to protect against something going wrong and us not being able to finish our work. But it does have the effect of continuing for a pretty significant time all these temporary measures.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion?
Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Heiberger?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the rationale that's been given, but I would oppose the motion. Changing that date, the way I understand this, takes away any incentive to complete work on revising this statute during the current session, which I think is something that is critical to be done. I think that if we get to the point where we have to suspend again, we'll find some way before June 20, whatever it is, to extend this farther if we need to. I think it's not a good idea, and I oppose it.
Representative Carmichael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Heiberger expressed my concern. Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Humphries?
Thank you. If I could ask Natalie a clarifying question, just to make sure that I understand. Natalie, this does not keep us from doing our work here that we've already said we want to do, which is revamp the KEMA statutes. Is that right? This isn't prolonging that?
No, it has no, I mean, if you pass a bill today, and it becomes law today, you could change that tomorrow, as long as you're
Okay.
here in session. So any change that we make can always be changed again.
Okay,
yeah.
so my understanding is that we intend to do that, be it the date that the Senate had, or the date we have, or the date of this. I mean, that's what I'm understanding from the chairman or just the committee. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood. Yep, thank you.
Just to confirm, yes, I mean, that is certainly my intent. The Senate in their bill has included March 31st as this date. We had June 1st, and now the proposal to go to January 24th of 2020. I don't know that I have a big concern, no matter what the date is, because I do think we need to keep the pressure on to make sure we come up with some permanent changes. I certainly appreciate the concern that, you know, next week something may happen and we're not able to be in session. And so it'd be nice to have some protections in place, extend that a little bit, but certainly it's whatever the committee thinks. So there's no further discussion. Representative Burris, you want to close?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I'm just trying to maintain the status quo that I think was implemented through HB 2016, which I believe, a number of parties, agreed to. And since firearms were brought up earlier, I just as an example, I certainly would want the people of my district to be able to adequately defend themselves. And we don't, I think you may have mentioned just earlier, in terms of, we don't know if the session could be cut short, suspended, and we don't know, what actions the governor could or would take. So I certainly support maintaining these protections and added checks and balances for all Kansans. And I move my amendment. Thank you.
The motion, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no.
No.
Think the ayes have it. Division's been called. Okay, so we're going to try to do this hybrid voting. All in favor, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 7 in favor. All opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 7 to 5, motion carries. Further amendments. Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard yesterday about possibly a loophole within the healing arts side of this legislation. It's my understanding that the Board of Healing Arts proposed closing that loophole and have worked together last night. And so I'll let Natalie kind of explain what we're trying to accomplish here with this amendment.
Yes, give me just a minute here.
While she's looking that up, I will say it is my understanding that everybody was satisfied and on the same page with this minor change.
Okay, so this amendment, there are a couple of changes here. The first one appears on page 14, adding a subsection B here that would provide that those practitioners that are provided a temporary emergency license under the authority we gave to grant those, if they are not a resident of Kansas, then they would not be required to pay the surcharge for this healthcare stabilization fund in 403404. That was one of the things requested by the Board of Healing Arts. And then the second change is here on page 16. Tucker yesterday talked about subsection H here and how that was being interpreted by some to allow practitioners who are licensed in other states to practice here, maybe without authority, types of professions that we don't necessarily have. And so this proposal would just strike subsection H.
Questions for Natalie? Representative Owens, do you want to move your motion or your amendment?
Yeah, so moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? Representative Burris, seconds. Any discussion? Representative Owens, you're first.
Sure. So as explained, there's concern that within H, it just says, you know, hey, if you're in good standing in your state, you can come to our state, you can practice. It gives the implication that you don't have to touch base with anybody, that you can just come here and start working. And I don't believe that the intent of our legislation was for that. I believe the intent was, hey, come here, we'll emergency approve you, we'll fast track your approval, but we still need to know who's practicing in our state. And I believe that's the intent of the Board of Healing Arts and those involved with this amendment is just, look, make sure you go through the process once you get here. We're happy to let you work here, right? We're not trying to create any impediment to anybody coming here to work. It's just, we need to know who's licensed and who's operating in the state of Kansas.
Further discussion? I just want to make clear that throughout the course of today, I do appreciate everyone getting together throughout the evening last night. That was kind of my directive when we left last night to come up with this language, so I do appreciate that. Throughout today, there's been some discussion of whether or not we're getting involved in that CRNA/AA discussion that's taken place in the Capitol the last couple of years, and certainly don't want us to delve into that. That's not an issue for the Judiciary Committee, certainly one for a different time and a different committee to study further. Other discussion? Representative Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you said that because it just brings that clarity to me that we are not making a decision about the AAs or the CRNAs. That's not what this is about. I feel like this bill is so many pages. It's way too important to get bogged down with this particular temporary provision. And so I'm going to support the amendment, but I'm not making any comment or any decision about how I feel about those two situations. So I just thank you for that clarity, and I'm kind of reiterating that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Anyone online? Seeing none, Representative Owens, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I close.
For the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. Further amendments? Seeing Representative Hoheisel? Oh, seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee for House Bill 2048 as amended? I'm sorry. I thought I acknowledged you in advance of asking that, which, yeah, Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out HB 2048 favorable
As amended?
as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Jennings. Any further discussion, committee? Seeing none, Representative Hoheisel, you may close.
Close.
For the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. The bill will be recommended favorably. Committee, that is all we have for today. Thanks to your good work, we will not be meeting tomorrow. We'll see you on Tuesday. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.